Okay, so let's talk about keynotes. Again, those who just signed in, I think Suzanne, hello, and Melissa. I have a data set link that I posted on the chat panel. I'm going to paste it again in case you didn't get it. We are going to download those files in a place that you can retrieve very easily, and then open it in Revit 2021. The file I want you to open, it's a file called office-keynote. It's the only Revit file in the Google Drive. Okay, so let's talk about way of annotating views. And this is an overlap with the topic of detailing, that which I assume you know from your Revit fundamentals class. But if you are in the process of detailing and you're adding keynotes to, or you're adding text notes to the view, text is something you find available under the Annotate tab. So just before I continue, does everybody has the data set? Does everybody do not have the data set? Let me know if you're struggling to get the data set. And then the file that we're gonna open is called office-keynotes. It's in Google Drive. All right. So the way to add text is very straightforward. Under the Annotate tab, you have the text button that will allow you to place a text family. Text families is something that you need to have built into your Revit template. Every company in their templates should have the appropriate text families with the appropriate font and arrow definitions that are appropriate to their documentation. The out-of-the-box template with Revit comes with just two text styles: the 1/4 of an inch Arial and the 3/32 Arial. You probably agree with me that the most frequently used text size is the 3/32 Arial. I think that's an industry standard for the US. And when you create a text, the first step is to select the appropriate text family. So you click on this part of the properties. This is the type selector. Whenever you want to select a specific type of family, that's part of the same category. And so companies have, I don't know, a dozen different types of text that serve different purposes. For example, you can have text associated with title blocks or with view titles that are 1/4 of an inch or larger, and then your very small text maybe for keynotes or annotations for equipment. But it's critical that you have those in place inside your office. So again, to place a piece of text, you go into the Annotate tab, and then you hit the text and select. I'm going to select the 3/32 Arial. Before I place the text, take a look at the text properties. This is the contextual tab. Contextual tab. And the contextual tab is important because it presents you with extended functionality to modify the element you're in the middle of creating. And so the contextual tab for text has important set groups of text, parameters or modifiers. You can define first how, if you want to associate your text with a leader, two segments, straight segments, or a curved segment. How do you want the leader be connected to the text paragraph, either to the left or to the right, and whether it is top, medium, or standard justified. The alignment of the text, if it's top align, left align, middle align, center align, bottom align, right align. This is straightforward. It's like your word processor. Not as complex, but it's pretty much similar thing. And so if I want to add a curved leader, just select it, and then add your leader and type your text. X16 partition, X16 exterior wall to remain. So, and notice how the command remain on until you hit escape. Escape is a way to cancel command. Pretty straightforward. This is how we add keynotes. Now, text can be moved. If you see this icon that has a plus, when you hit on that, then you can relocate the text to a different location. Do you see this little icon that's like a curved arrow or a round arrow? That allows me to rotate the text. So if you need the text to be vertical, that's how you rotate it. It doesn't let you input the amount of degrees, but if you want to be very precise, you can use the rotate command instead. It also has the paragraph tab or paragraph button that allow you to stretch the size of your paragraph. And then it has the arrows have an end leader grip and a midpoint grip. And this just allows you to change the shape of the arrow. You can also change the arrow to have a different type of leader. For example, if I want to swap this leader from arc to arm and an elbow, you can just click this checkbox in the properties and it will transform it into an arm and elbow. If you enable it again, it will make it curve. So when you convert this into an arm and an elbow, notice that you can also grab the grip and snap it horizontal so that the elbow remains flat. It almost feels like snap horizontally. You can also feel it. You can feel it when it snaps. If this is not the arrow you like, you can certainly switch it by another type. This is a type property of the text. So hopefully you have in your organization the arrows that work for you. If you want, I mean, think standard, it's fill 30 degrees. So if you edit the type of this text, you can find the subfamily of leaders available in the type properties. This is an arrow for 30 degrees. You can change it to arrow filled 30 degrees, which looks like that. Or some companies prefer the 20 degrees or the 15 degrees. I don't know. I've been in fights with architects, just trying to agree on which is the best arrow. But everyone's speaking about this. So grab the end grip and make it touch an element. This unfortunately doesn't snap. I wish Revit allowed me to snap to objects, but it doesn't. So you have to make your best judgment as to where the grip goes, but it's not going to snap. All right, if you want to change the text, just double click it. It'll open up the edit text sub panel or sub contextual panel. And you can add like bullets to text if you needed to. or change this to none. And you can choose a different, you can change everything to caps if you start typing this in lower caps, and change the indent size, etc. So when you are like detailing a view, you can just copy the text, and if you know you're going to add 3 or more text pieces, you can just copy them, and then notice that. And when you copy, here's a shortcut for copy. If you hit just control drag, that makes a copy of an object, and you don't have to type it. Then I'm gonna type this. Control key plus C equals copy. I use this all the time. And you can copy anything that has graphic properties. Control drag or control drag makes a copy, rather than looking for the text. Look for the command in the ribbon. All right, so when you copy this text, I mean, you can also click the shift button, and you see that dash line. This is a way to force orthogonal alignment of the copied element. So right now I'm pressing at the same time Control and Shift, and this is going to make a copy in an orthogonal display. All right, so Revit loves to align text. So if you have a text that is floating around and you just want to align it, move it until you see the vertical alignment line pop up. Exterior storefront to remain. And when you're done, just hit escape twice, and that's how this works. You can have also multiple leaders to a text. For example, if I want a leader going on the other side, just add it and make sure you pick the appropriate alignment. So in this case, I'm going to pick them both arrows to start from the top. So I hit the leader at top right, and then I add an extra leader, and now you have a piece of text with 2 arrows. All right, text is view specific. It only lives in this particular view. And because it's an annotation object, they're going to scale up and down according to the scale of the view to maintain the print fidelity. So if I change the scale, that is how it goes smaller, because it's trying to preserve the print fidelity. This is going to measure 3/32 regardless of the scale of the view. I'm going to return to 1/8. You can have as many families as you need. You don't have to do this. I'm going to open the Audubon architectural file just to show you the variety of text, the families that you can find in practice. So if I add a text here, notice how I have all these different text styles. When you copy paste element from other projects, the text that comes with it, sometimes it travels. For example, I can tell from this drawing that there were some foreign definitions that were brought into the project from a different project. the correct definitions are everything that starts with DG. That's the name of the firm who developed this. And they have like 10 different, 12 different text styles. Some of them have different text properties, so they have different arrow definitions. All right, so this was just so you see that you can have a big variety of text styles. So the simple form of annotation, this is text is typical, straightforward, but it doesn't behave like a keynote. I mean, the beauty of a keynote is that a keynote is a symbol that is associated with an element, that it retrieves information that is baked in a database. And so it allows you to have a consistent set of descriptions, description representations. And in Revit, you have a couple of strategies to facilitate your keynote. So before I move out from the text, any question about text? Text with arrows, very straightforward. All right, let's go with ways that are not smart ways, or the dummy ways of creating keynotes. The dummy way of creating a keynote is to, and this is, I'm going to type it so we remember it. This is the dummy method. The dummy method means that there is a annotation symbol family. The symbol family represents a keynote with a certain shape. Sometimes it's 6. It's a polygon with 6 sides. Sometimes it's 4. You decide how you want to represent those families. And then you have a parameter that has number ID, and then a description. And these 2 parameters are manually edited by the user. And that's why it's called dummy, because you have user have to decide what is the number sequence, and they have to decide what is the description embedded in that symbol. And so this is how it works. I have for you in the folder of definitions a set of keynote families. I'm going to insert, I'm going to open here the demolition plan. And I need to tag to add some keynotes here. For example, I need to say this is create an opening, demo wall in preparation for a storefront, demo door, and I need to clarify that we're just removing the door, but we're keeping the frame. And then there's other ones like remove walls and doors. And so if I want to do this with dummy keynotes, I load a dummy keynote family. Dummy keynotes are families of the generic annotation category. So you go to the insert tab, and I'm going to load a family. And from the files that are in your folder in the Google Drive, I'm going to navigate to the my Oxman folder, and under the keynotes, there is a keynote demo, RFA, keynote demo. And then I open it. That keynote family, again, like I say, it's part, you're going to find it under the annotation symbols. And you can see it here, keynote demo. And notice that when you open these generic annotation, it has 10 different numbers. Let me show you how this works. I'm going to right click on the keynote demo, edit. You don't have to do this. I'm just going to show you how this family was developed. This is a family that started with a generic annotation template. The user created the symbology and decided that demolition keynote needs to have this triangle shape. But these are just lines. You can create additional lines, or you can change the shape if you need it. You can make it round or hexagonal or triangular. This company decided that they needed the demolition plan for this project were going to be a triangle shape. And then right at the center, it's a label. A label, it's a piece of text that report information about a parameter. And then when you edit that label, it will tell you that it's reporting a parameter called demo note number. And this was a parameter that was created on the fly in the family. So if you were to start this from scratch yourself, start a family using the generic annotation family, create your lines in the background that represent the tag shape, and then add a couple of custom parameters, family parameters, and add them using this switch into the label parameters. When you create a parameter, you have to decide whether it's a type or an instance. Remember, this is important because it's going to impact how the keynote is handled by the user in the project. If it's a type, all the elements with the same number are going to receive the same description, and they're going to be, is a global setting for all the elements of the same type. If it's an instance, then every keynote may receive an individual description or an individual number. To make it consistent, I think this approach of making a type works. So these custom parameters are type parameters. Right? Remember, a type parameter is the same across all the elements of the same type. And if you change it there, you change it for all of them. And so, and this particular family is intended to be used only for demolition plans. And so, if you see the families that are provided to you, there is a family for every view type. You have a family for floor plans. You have a family for roof plans, a family for RCPs, and a family for demo. But for every view type variation, you have a different keynote. And every keynote we have keynote numbers as different family types. And then, so that's how it works. Again, I'm just opening this for your reference. So if I want to place keynote number 1, you can review the description in the properties. I have a question from Holman. If these are built in Revit, no. The families need to be created from scratch. The template is out of the box. So you go File, New. No, it's a template. It's a family. New family, and the template is under generic annotations. So it should be annotations, generic annotation. This is your starting point. And from there, you add the custom parameters, at least 2, the ID number and the description. That makes sense, Homer?
Yes.
Yeah. But if you want to grab the ones I have here, feel free to do so and just change them as needed. All right, so I grab these demolition keynotes and then I drag and drop. And this is keynote number 1. And if you select keynote number 1 and open the type properties, it says that this is remove existing walls as needed. Some may argue whether you have to say that because you already have this dash line, but that's not the point of the class. Let's just show you how to create keynotes. When I add an arrow, to the left, and notice that the arrow doesn't have it doesn't have an arrow definition, so I need to change the type properties of the annotation. So you go edit type, and where it says leader arrowhead, swap it with filled 20 degrees. And now you can change as needed. This is, again, this was the way this company decided to do demolition keynotes. You decide how you want to do it on your end. Let's add another one. If I need to add another one, let's say I'm going to bring, to study all the different types, just select the keynote demo, edit type, and notice how you have all these different numbers here. Like keynote 2 says remove existing door. Keynote 3 says remove window. Keynote 4 says remove concrete slab. 5. You can create new ones. Let's say, for example, you need also to remove the reflective, remove the ceilings. And that node is not here. So what you do is duplicate it, give it a number, sequence. I believe, let's see, the last sequence here, it's 10. So I'll do 11. I'm going to duplicate again. To get here, you select the keynote, and you edit the type, duplicate the type, and we're going to give this keynote number 11, because there's a total of 10 keynotes here. And then my keynote 11, you're going to have the description is going to say remove ceiling above. And the keynote for these is going to be 11. So now I have a new type based on the existing one. You can also see available here. And you can drag it and drop it as needed. Keynote number 1 is still there, and I switch it by mistake, so I can always return this to number 1 using the type selector. So I'm going to add the door, for example, remove window, or remove doors. So for the doors, you can just flip through the different types. The description number 2 discloses that that's remove existing door. So I'm going to make a copy of this. Again, control drag, make a copy, create an elbow to the door, and select it and swap it to keynote number 2. And keynote number 2 is as a type property, it tells me that it's remove existing door frame casing, etc. And let's see, the arrows is a type definition. Unfortunately, they didn't have arrowhead, so I have to reassign it for every type. But this is something you do one per type. Okay, and if this is a keynote that applies to everything that is above, you can add 2 arrows, and then just drag the arrow to the left. And you can create this type of representations that is like a keynote with 2 arrows. And this is like, I'll put it here. So when you move it, make sure that you click, like one of the arrows, and that's going to move the arrow and the keynote. If you click just the symbol, it's that plus sign here, and that's going to leave the arrows, the end arrows pointing where they were. All right, so this is a It's a dummy method because the database is really not connected to any object. You build your descriptions as part of parameters that are part of a generic annotation. And then there's this connection between what the geometry is and what the keynote is. So the keynote is not reporting anything embedded in the object. And that's what is the dummy method. But it works. A lot of firms like this method. And then if you decide later, then you need to change something about the description, you just double click the type. Let's say you need to say as required, just put it here. And because it's the same description applied to all the demo plans, then I just made an edit to the text description. And then the way you represent this in your view is you create a schedule of generic annotations. So let's make an example very quickly. I'm going to create a new sheet. I'm going to drop the demolition plan into the new sheet. And I'm going to show you how to create this schedule of demolition keynotes. All right, this project doesn't have any sheet, so I'm going to create a new one. Go to the View tab, and then hit the Sheet command. Choose the 30 by 42 title block template, and this is going to create Sheet A101. You can just rename it via right-click under the Sheet branch. I'm just going to call this D101. You can call it rename. You can also call it the way it needs to be. This is demolition phase 1. Again, this is all right-click. If you miss this spot, just go to the View tab, hit the Sheet command, select the 30 by 42, hit OK, and then rename the view as D101 demolition phase. So I'm going to drag and drop the demolition plan. So from the project browser, select the demolition plan level 1, drag it and drop it. That's my demo plan. And now, how do I add the list of keynotes? That's a schedule of demolition keynotes. A schedule of annotation in Revit, it's called a node block. So remember that. A node block, it's a schedule of generic annotation families. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a node block that looks exactly like a schedule. The node block, it's sensitive to the list of keynotes in the view. So for example, you can have several keynotes. You can have several floor plans with different keynotes. Say you have the demolition level 1, demolition level 2, demolition level 3. All of them have different lists of keynotes. But the node block is has the ability to only display the instances that are existing in the view. And so to create a node block, you go to the View tab, and then go to Schedules, and you see here it says node block. And the node block is schedule. And the information you need, it's this is the name of these are the list of all the generic annotation. And I want a schedule of the keynote demo families. So these are, again, this is your list of generic annotation families. If you add additional generic annotation, they're going to be listed here. And I want to make a schedule of the demolition keynotes. Again, you go to node block, select the family, and you can call this family the name of these schedule demolition keynotes. And what the information needs to go, it's the note and the description. That's it. Hit the arrow pointing, the green arrow pointing to the right. And then hit OK. So this is the list of this is the list of all the keynotes. You can stretch it to display the full description. This gray row above it is something you can remove. So you can go to the appearance edit button in the schedule properties. And you can remove the blank row before the data. So this, I started by this appearance here, and then go to the appearance tab, clear this checkbox, and this is going to get rid of this empty arrow above the data. Okay, you can override the column headers just by typing on top of it. But instead of keynote no, this is the name of the parameter. Maybe I just say key. And then on the description, you just, description is fine. And that's it. I have 3 keynotes in the project. And then under the sorting and grouping, yeah, I think that we're okay here. They are sorted alphabetically, but I can sort them. I can force them to sort by the demo node. Notice now that they are sorted by default. It's sorted by the order in which they were created. And so I created, and now it's sorted by numerical. So this demolition keynote or note schedule, it's something that I can drag and drop on the sheet. So on the list of schedules, here is my demolition keynote. You just drag it and drop it. And then you can adjust as needed. I'm just dragging the control triangles to resize it. And there it goes. If a keynote is removed from the plan, let's say I remove this, notice how the keynote automatically reacts to that change. Or if I add something, a new keynote here, so I'm going to copy this. I'm going to copy this 3 times. And notice how every time I copy the generic annotation, the keynote is repeated in the schedule. And this is not what I want, right? Maybe I just need the keynote listed once instead of 3 times. So the reason this is happening is because the notebook, it's set up to display every item. And so to make sure that only one keynote is listed here, open the keynote schedule, and in the sorting and grouping, disable this checkbox. Again, what I did is open the demolition keynote and disable on the sorting and grouping, deselect every item. 1, 2, 3. And when you do that, then the item is just going to be listed once. And that's going to translate into the keynote here. That makes sense. And what I was saying is that if I add an additional item, then the keynote also react. I'm going to make another copy of this keynote. And I'm going to change the type to number 5. And maybe add an arrow. Okay, and then I added keynote number 5, and keynote number 5 it's also listed in the appropriate key. So this is the process that happens. This is the dummy process. There's some nice things about this, and what's nice about it is that the it's not that difficult. I mean, you delete a keynote, and it doesn't reorder the numbering of the keys. You're going to notice that one of the disadvantage of using these smart keynotes is that it forces the keys to be in sequence. So if you remove one row, then the key sequence is renamed. And I don't like that about that. But one of the disadvantages of this is not smart. The keynote information is not connected to any centralized database, and is not embedded into any of the instance or the geometry properties. But it's a good strategy for small projects, I would say. If you now need to build your floor plan definitions, so I'm going to go to the construction floor plan, then I have to add another type of keynote. You don't have to do this, but I'm just going to go and insert again the plan definitions, which has a different look. And then I go into the keynote floor plan that has, this one has 27 different descriptions. And you can just drag and drop. I'm gonna add randomly just few of them. If you want to understand what they are describing, just select the keynote, edit the type, and it tells you this is a 6-foot high pony wall. Add a leader and drag it here. And this one is support for suspended. There's a projector located above, so maybe it goes here. And this one is semi-research 5 extinguished cabinet. And let's say that is right here. I'm going to add some keynotes as well, leaders as well. All right, this is my floor plan keynotes. Notice that they are not in sequence. That's one of the disadvantages, but they are, I could create a node block with all the definitions as well, the same way I did with the demolition plan. Again, you don't have to do this. I'm going very fast so that you understand the process. I'm going to create a new sheet. This sheet is a construction floor plan. Then I'm going to drag the construction plan into the sheet. And then I'm going to create a new node block. Instead of the demo plans, I'm going to select the keynote plans. Again, I'm going to add the number and the description. And drag and drop the node block, the new node block into the floor plan. Node blocks are available under the schedules. I want to rename it and call it floor or construction plan keynotes, and then drag it and drop it, and use the grips to stretch it. And that's it. Notice how it's not in sequence. That's one of these disadvantages. Another strategy that works for certain type of project is to always have the view specific keynotes all listed as a schedule in every sheet. Again, that's an option. For that, you just use one keynote, and I don't know, your 30 or 40 keynotes that you use throughout the project, they are always listed the same in every sheet. I'm not a big fan of that strategy, but I've seen it used in some projects. Sometimes architects like to display or to embed a symbol here. This, for example, like if you would like to see the lines of the symbol in here, there's no way to embed it here. So that's another drawback. I guess you could create, you can create you can drag and drop a symbol right next to it. Well, let me open it. I think if this is the keynote, the key, in Revit, you can add in the schedule, I thought you could add a special character, sometimes special characters. So the options is to add the actual using annotation, annotate detail line, and say, okay, this is what the symbol looks like, and then you list the numbers. But there's no way to embed the generic annotation symbol inside each of the scheduled cells. And again, some architects don't like that. But for that, you could have a generic annotation, another generic annotation that you just place on top of it. That is one option. Not a perfect scenario, but not bad. Not too bad if you ask me. So any question how this works, the dummy keynotes? Before we move to the other types. All good? All right. All right, so the next topic is the smart keynotes. And the smart keynotes are families that report information contained by the object. And so elements in Revit have instance and type properties, and you can report element information about that object, or disclose information contained by the material of the object, or connect the object to a complete custom database. So let me show you how that works. I'm going to close this. You can save this file if you want. I'm going to close all these plans. And let's see. No, I'm going to stick with the same, the office keynote. Just open the construction floor plan for phase 1. All right, so the smart keynotes are under the Manage tab, under the View Annotate tab. And you find that there are 3 types of keynotes. The element keynote report, it's a label of instance or type properties. So you have to select the elements and configure the elements to report a specific type of information. Materials, labels. This is a label of material definitions. So these are created and set up inside the material library. And this will report information about the material. So this is sometimes useful for finished plans or interior elevations where you want to display when there's a correlation between the material associated with the elements and the keynote that is displayed with that. And then you have the user keynote, which is a label of descriptions in a database. And when it's user, a user keynote is not connected to the object per se, but the object is connected to a data set. And then you retrieve the label that it's associated with that element. So let's explore the 3 types. And again, you decide what works for your company, whether you want to use just text, dummy, generic annotation, or a combination of element, material, or user label. Before we get started with keynotes, let's look at the keynote set. The keynote settings here, it's important to understand that you have to link keynotes to a keynote table. It's a TXT file that contains keys and descriptions of a Revit of your project keynotes. Revit provides one keynote out of the box, and it's in this path. It's called, if you search for this path, it's the name, the default path, it's Revit keynote _ Imperial 2004. You can, for localized files, that means for files that are working in a closed network, you can override the format of this path as an absolute path. And what that means is this file is going to be open for several locations. It's always going to look for the full path. Or you can make it relative, and relative means it's going to try to search for the text file relative to the location of the project. So it's going to try to look for the key in the location of the Revit folder or the Revit file. Or you can say a library location. A library location means that it's looking at the out-of-the-box library locations. So I'm going to keep it as library location. And then the other thing is to understand is that you have to define a numbering method. A numbering method can be by keynote or can be by sheet. By keynote means that it's going to retrieve the number from the database. And by sheet means that it's going to start a sequence on every sheet. So if you have keynotes in 3 different sheets, each of those keynote sequences are going to restart from 1 to the end in the order in which they were created. Again, this is a project standard. It needs to be discussed by the PM. What is the method they want to use? They want to have a consistent set of numbers as displayed in the keynote database, or do you want Revit to override the keynote in the sequence in which they were created on a sheet-by-sheet basis? So I'm just going to leave it by Keynote right now. And in the, so is my mic working or not? You guys hear me?
It's better now.
Yeah, I was hearing notifications that my headset was getting connected to my TV. I don't know. Anyway, it seems to be gone now. All right, if I miss anything, let me know if you need me to repeat anything. So what I was saying is that the keynotes and the keynote settings is that you need to choose where you want them to be by keynote or by sheet. Let's open a keynote definition so that you understand how they are put together. So in the data set that I provided for today, there are a couple of keynote definitions. These are out of the box. And so this is a text file. You can open it in Word if you want. And a keynote, it's a structure of text organized in tiers. So these out-of-the-box keynote, it's a reflection of keynotes that are using the CSI Division 2000 master format, it uses all these divisions as main tiers, and every tier receives header identification. So the front end of the database, it's the first tier of information. Then you have what coming next after the main tiers are the sub tiers, like the first level of the sub tiers. But this set of keynotes, it's a subset of the summary of the keynote at the division 0-100. So for example, this one here is telling you that the summary is a subset of subdivision 0-1-0-1-0-0-0, which is this one. So the description always, the tiers are formed by adding the parent branch as a suffix. And so for every node, you decide where it needs to be nested. And this is a manual work. I mean, you hit tab and then you select what is the parent division it belongs to. And that's the part I don't like about this method, because every project should have a dedicated text node. And then users need to understand how to build this database manually. Well, let's see how it works, and then I'll show you how you can customize this or build one from scratch. So in this particular example, I'm going to add some element keynotes to some objects here. So let's start with the first one, element keynote. An element keynote is going to report information that is available to you under the type parameters. And you're going to see that there is a parameter called keynote here. So if you select a wall, any wall, and you edit the type, and then you go to the identity data group, you're going to see a parameter called keynote. When you click that, you're going to see 3 little dots. And those 3 little dots open the database of keynotes. And so this is the structure of keynote that ships out of Revit. It displays the 48 different divisions. Here is the path. And if you open all the different divisions, you see the subdivisions and then the sub-subdivisions. This one has a particular, this has 4 tiers of information. And when you look at the text file, let me open it here. This text file is exactly, it's what this dialog box is displaying. But the way Revit it's organized in tiers because the database has a way to report what is the parent tier. So look at division 01, general requirements. It has temporary facilities, and all those are displayed in this text node with the parent definition reported. Let's look at one example, for example. Look at division. You can search and you can also find keynotes here using the text editor. Want to find for 0153. It's not getting it. 0153. Oh, oh, here. So notice how these 5 subdivisions of temporary protective elements are listed as childs of a parent keynote called temporary construction. And so notice how at the end of every subdivision there is, you call off what the parent is. And that allows it to be displayed in this format. So you pick what works for this. These are walls, or there's not subdivision for walls, but I think you may find it maybe split between metals and thermal and moisture protection. So let's look for some let's see, sheet. Oh, let's do some metal. Let's say that this keynote is describing aspects about the steel. So for that wall, I have that keynote associated. And this is a type property, so all the elements belonging to this generic 6 wall is going to have that keynote. Again, what I did is I selected the wall, I added the type, I scroll down and look for the keynote parameter, click those 3 little buttons to open the database, and I scroll down to the 054000C6. This is a random keynote. And now when I keynoted, just hit the keynote button. So key element keynote, and it's going to report that database. Now this method of keynoting, a method that displays the CSI master format number, might not be that popular in this side of in California, but it's sometimes very popular in the Midwest and the East Coast. I work in projects that where all the keynotes were based on CSI definitions, and it takes dedicated technical coordination to make sure that multiple users have access to the same database at the same time. Now, the method of editing keynotes manually, it's cumbersome. I hate it, to be honest. To be aware of what is the parent branch or subparent branch, it's prone to a lot of manual errors. If you made a mistake by not typing the tab or not typing the appropriate group, then it will the database will not display correctly. So there is a solution out there that I recommend a lot, and it's called this add-in for Revit called the Keynote Manager. The Keynote Manager, it's a much friendly way of editing keynotes using a common data set that is accessed and edited by multiple users at the same time. This is recommended for large, medium-sized projects to large projects that have multiple components. I'm not gonna explain how it works, but it's an add-in for Revit, and it gives you this like user interface where you can very easily add new keynotes based on the branch that you decide where to add it. You can organize it. You can move the hierarchy up and down. It's allows you to have multiple users edit at the same time, something you cannot do in Revit. There's only one person can edit at the same time. But I think for Revit LT, this may not work because you cannot install add-ins, if that's right. Here's another suggestion from Nicole. You can also use an Excel file. That it's another option. There is I don't have an example with keynotes using an Excel file, but you can technically open a tab delimited keynote in Excel and edit it in Excel. Like I think you could open this text file in Excel. Open with I should open Excel. I'm just launching Excel here, and let's see if I can use open Excel. So this is another way of doing it using Excel. Just make sure that you save this as a TXT file. Do not save it as an Excel file. It's not going to recognize it. And then this allow you to avoid hitting the tab that you can actually edit the parent definitions.
What's the main difference between an element keynote and a user keynote? I've only used user keynotes. I've never used element ones, but is it just that the element ones are strictly arranged by CSI?
No, they both read in the same database. It's where the keynote lives. So let me show you here. So here is this is connected. This keynote is part of the wall identity data definitions. A user keynote, which I haven't talked about, will snap to an object, and it will read the same database. In fact, I'm just going to associate with the same one, metal 40 C6.
But they
And
show
so,
up in different places.
yeah, and so this one, when you select it, the keynote is driving the value. In this one, the element is driving the value. But it's reading the same database. The beauty of this is that you don't have to search. If you do an element one, you don't have to search for the value because it's already there. So I do another element here. You see how it immediately knows it's 0540. Whether if I do a user keynote, I have, every time I do it, I have to open the database and select it because it doesn't know what to search it for. Does that make sense?
I think I understand.
Yeah. So user keynotes are not connected to the elements, but the key values are instance properties of the tag. And an element keynote is embedded in the properties of the object. But they both are reading off the same database. Another example of so do you get the user keynote? User keynotes are reading off the database, but is not retrieving information embedded in information in the elements. Let's talk about the material one. The material keynote retrieved parameters that are embedded into the material library. To display in the project, the material needs to be visible in the view. And so sometimes for floor finishes that works. I'm going to do very quickly a floor. This project doesn't have a floor. But I'm going to create a floor around the entire project. And this floor right now has a generic 12 definition, 12-inch thickness. I'm going to edit the type to access the type properties. And I'm going to associate this to a material called concrete. So I search for the concrete material, hit OK, OK, and OK. So a material library, a material property retrieve its information from the material definition. So this floor is made of concrete. The concrete material needs to have a keynote information in order to report it in a keynote. Now, the first thing is to make sure you load a material tag. This is different from the keynote tag. So you go to the insert. I think there may be one here. Let's just double check. Yeah, there's one here. There's one called material tag. There's one that ships out of Revit. You can find it in the blank tab. So if you don't have, you should all have this material tag. But if you don't have it, just go to the insert tab, load family, and in the out of the box, library definition, imperial library under annotations. You're gonna find the material library, the material tag, material, where are you? Maybe under architectural. Yeah, here's. So under imperial library, annotations, architectural, that's where you will find the material tag. It's already loaded here. So for the material tag to work, the material needs to have that information. And so let's open the material dialog box. You go to the Manage tab and hit the material tab. I'm going to look for that material, the concrete one, generic concrete. this one. So the concrete material under the identity data has a keynote value and it has a mark value. So the keynote can report either. It can report, when you open a material keynote, you can make the material report the keynote, the material mark, or the material keynote. In fact, if you hit these three little buttons, it's going to open exactly the same keynote definition. So if I'm looking for concrete, let's say concrete is structural concrete. Well, these are, see if there's finishes, other finishes. Let's say this floor, this floor is going to have a carpet, and the carpet, it's, well, I needed to reflect it in the properties, but this has to be concrete. So I'm just going to keep it with concrete. Concrete, structural. I'm just going to leave it like that. The keynote is 331. You can make the material report the keynote or to repair the mark. The mark is a system that interior architects usually set up for themselves. For example, you can say C1, that means concrete one. And then once this information is a metadata embedded in the concrete, then you can apply the material. So I'm going to apply a material keynote to the floor. So again, you go to the annotate tab and then hit the material keynote. In the choices, in the type selector, you can report the keynote number in a box, in a small box or a large box, or just the number. I'm just going to choose the first one, the small box. And notice how it reports the keynote in the keynote definition of the material. That makes sense. So this 033100, it was a property that I added to the concrete identity keynote. So that's what's happening. The concrete, it's associated with the floor. Because it's associated with the floor, it will display this keynote, and then this keynote is associated with that, which is associated with the floor. If I change the material to carpet, let's do that. Let's say the floor now is going to have a finish called carpet, and then I'm going to associate this to a keynote here. And under the finishes, I want to select carpet. And it's carpet C1. And I'm going to pull the mark C1 here as well. The mark is an optional parameter. You can make I can change the label to report either the mark or the keynote value. But I associate the carpet with these two keynotes. Easy, you open the material library, go to the carpet one, and add these values. So that's okay. I'm just going to hit OK here. And then I'm going to change this floor. So I'm going to say that this floor, at the top of the floor, I'm going to have a finish that it's 1/8 of an inch in thickness. And it's going to have as a material the carpet one. And notice that as soon as I do that, I'm changing the material surface of the floor. And when I apply it, notice how the keynote also changed. And the keynote is driven by the material definition of the element. So when is this useful? If you're doing finishes plans, in my opinion, as long as the materials are applied to all the elements in the plan. And as I said, you could make the keynote to report the description. You see this checkbox here. This changes the keynote and it adds the description. I mean, I don't do that. Maybe on some details to make sure that all the details across the product has the same text description. You can do that. And then if I add this family, instead of reporting the label, the key value, which is the key value connected with the database, I could actually make it report the keynote text. And then this, I'm going to load this into the project and replace it. And now I'm going to have the description be reported in the label. But that's not how it's typically used. So, so that's how this works. The three methods of keynoting are connected to a common database. That is the common recurring topic of it. So to summarize, the element keynote, it's a keynote description that is embedded inside the type parameters of objects. The material keynotes are properties embedded in the material definitions under the identity data. This keynote is tapping the same database as the element ones. And the custom keynotes, it's a keynote that it's brought into the project and it's connected to the database, but it doesn't have any metadata embedded in elements. Does that make sense? So, I presented three different ways of documenting a project. You can use text, which is the simplest form. You can use dummy generic annotations and create a different family for different view types. And you can have element, material, or user keynotes as part of the project. Let me show you the Audubon project, because in this particular project, they use dummy annotations as a strategy. You can see how in the list of schedules, and you have this from last week's data set. They have a node block for every view type. When you open that, they have all the demolition keynotes. They even use keynotes for details. This is all your database of keynotes. Obviously, when they create a keynote, in a detail, they report the description rather than the value. And the beauty of this is that if you later decide that you need to change the description, you just change it once and it translate across all the details in your project. Here's another one for coded notes for details. There's one for enlarged plans and interior elevations. And each of them use a different generic annotation. These are the ones for the floor plan. These are the ones for the reflective ceiling plans. But they are not using database for this strategy. So what are the drawbacks of the user keynotes is that they rename and renumber. So right now, the keynotes are in the keynote settings. If you display them by keynote, it's going to report the value of the keynote in the database. But if you change this by sheet, then notice how now it starts a new sequence based in the order in which they were created. So if you use keynote by sheet, then when you create your schedule of sheets, your schedule of keynotes, only the keynotes that are visible in the view will be renamed. And say, for example, I remove number 2. Notice how number 2 gets renamed and number 3 get renamed. Again, when you remove a keynote by sheet, the keynotes are renumbered in the sequence in which they were created. And some architects don't like that because they want, once something is issued for agents to review, you don't want to risk the documentation by changing definitions that have already been reviewed and approved. So I think you might recommend that if you don't want that to happen, then use keynote by keynote, use a numbering method by keynotes so that it doesn't change. It doesn't change the sequence, or use dummy keynotes in which they're going to be fixed. We're not going to change. All right, so that's all I have for you today. Any question about documenting with keynotes, material keynotes, or custom keynotes, user keynotes? Again, if you are not, if you have the full Revit, I highly recommend Keynote Manager for big projects. It saves you a ton of time. I've used it many times in my projects when I was in practice. It's not expensive, and it will allow multiple users to edit the database in a streamlined way.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I really like the idea of being able to use keynotes to label materials, but if I have 3 types of carpet, does that mean that within my project I need to duplicate the carpet material? Yep. Okay. That's probably why we don't use that. Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
But it's a cool feature though. Okay.
Yeah. To display the full breadth of materials in your project, every material needs to be part of the project. And if you don't model a material, then you're not reporting it. It's not going to work. For small retrofits that have, and this is a small retrofit, and it has 2 or 3 paints, and the paints are, for example, applied to the rooms. You could have your schedule of paints out of the material, but in big projects, it's not efficient to model materials on every geometry. It's a waste of effort in my opinion. So that's why I agree. I adjust this strategy according to the scope of work. Any other question? All right. So let's see, for next class, we're going to talk about site tools. So let's make sure that you can you download the data set, but we're going to look at 3 different ways of creating topo surfaces, by point, by CAD import. And we're going to work on an exterior parking lot. I'm going to show you how you can use some of the grading. You're all going to understand some of the limitations of the site tools as well. But this ability to connect the project with a site is always a challenge for a lot of architects. I'll show you what can be done out of the box and suggest some tools that you can bring as add-ins for those who can afford it. All right, then next week it's about more documentation and strategies about view controls, templates, and revisions. And yeah, we are just half point of the course officially, so hope you're learning something. Again, if you want to stay over and want me to have a one-on-one with you, feel free to stay. Otherwise, I'll see you Thursday. Everybody have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.